spring football recruiting, I don't know the exact timeline, Fitz, and that's what you're here to tell us about in terms of when players are coming to visit now that we're in March. But of course, Penn State starts spring practice on the 25th. There's some gray area there, but the big news this weekend, Jerquaden Guilford decommitting from the program. Tell us about that situation and how you view this news.
Yeah, Friday night at 7:00. Great time for that.
Yep.
Jerquaden Guilford, a guy that I'm very high on, still high on, by the way, even though he decommitted from Penn State. I think he's a really good player. I think he's a really good athlete, and
Yep.
Penn State would like to get him back into the fold. And I think they've got an opportunity to. Obviously, when you decommit from somewhere, it doesn't really usually come back around. But I think Penn State will still be in this one. Sting factor, decently high. This is a really good receiver, really good potential receiver. I think he's probably a guy, maybe not a freshman impact type guy, but he's got all the tools. He's got the size. He's one of those physically tough receivers that we've talked about that has eluded Penn State for some time now. So I think it's pretty stingy. You look at what Penn State's doing at receiver. They still got, Jasir Rogers and LeVar Keys in the fold, and they're going to continue to press at guys like Messiah Hampton, Travis Johnson in Virginia, Connor Salmon in Virginia. Well, I guess he's in Maryland now at the Bullis School, Davion Brown in Virginia. And then they've got some national guys that are going to come out and visit in the spring and summer. So still have options out there. It helps that it helps that there is a couple guys in the barn already, so to speak. So it doesn't really change my feelings on the class as a whole. Although, he's a guy that they'd like to have back. Like he's a really, really good player. So he tweeted a bunch of offers last night, Michigan, Purdue, Kentucky, several offers, but very curious to see which direction this one goes. This is a interesting one. We're going to probably write a little bit about it later on the site of blueillustrated.com, but he's definitely a sting for Penn State. And I don't think it's a situation where he's going to turn around and commit anywhere right away. I think he's going to continue to assert his options and take a look at what's out there. So that's a tough one for Penn State, because that was one that they really liked and he really liked them, and jumped on board in December and out of the class by, I guess that was the end of February. So not a great stop.
So I'm going to put this up here on the screen here for the YouTube audience, because I just want to paint the picture of the differences between what Fitz and I are talking about. Both of us really like Quay Guilford in terms of his talent, his potential, and where he is right now. 3-star and 88 overall in the latest On 300 update. I don't know why. Maybe a little bit of a body catcher, maybe a little bit of a potential over production. I hadn't fully gotten into his full game tape, but the highlights were enough to get me very excited.
Well, it's also March, so right. And he's north of the whatever parallel separates the South from the North. Like a lot of these movements that we see in February are going to be guys that are working out in the South and doing the camps and things like that. So I think that, and I said this on the board at blueillustrated.com, like when you will see more changes in the Northeast and I guess Midwest as the weather gets warmer, as more guys are being able to be seen. And, I think that he's a 4-star guy. I think he's a really, really talented player.
To that point, Penn State, Ohio State, Tennessee, Miami, Georgia, Kansas, Michigan, Toledo in here, really important offer. There's just a ton. There's just Notre Dame, Alabama are interested. I think there's not official offers here, but the list here is going to grow, in my opinion, as well. Because do you see him eventually becoming a national prospect? Is he already a national prospect, and like he committed before he realized that? Is that part of the conversation here?
No, I think he's a semi-regional guy. Like there's a lot of really good receivers out there. Like they are like, I don't think Notre Dame has offered, but if Jaywan Sider's there, he saw what he saw at Penn State. Maybe Jaywan goes after a guy that he knows or thinks can play. So I think he'll be past that regional recruit, but short of the national scene, if that makes sense. I know he's got the Ohio State offer. He earned it at camp, which is pretty cool. Earned his Penn State offer at camp as well. But I think he'll be a guy that's on the upper end of the regional, lower end of the national type guy. Like I think he's really good. But it's so tough with receiver, because everywhere you go, there's talent. Like we think there's talent. Like everywhere you go, there are big fish that look like Jerquaden Guilford in the South and Southwest and California and just all over the place. So I don't know how to quantify it, but I think he'll be in the mix. But
yeah,
I mean, if you're on that fringe 4-star spot, like you're probably a pretty good player. So I think
I think you characterize it perfectly of saying Penn State is still in this, but of course there's, that's that elevation of maybe not fully national, but a guy that is going to command a lot of attention and I assume a lot of NIL dollars, which is part of, I'm
Well,
assuming
and
part of
when
this
you come,
conversation.
NIL not a factor right now.
Okay, got it.
When you come back into it, you all of a sudden sort of put yourself back out there. So you saw him tweet out those offers last night: Michigan, Purdue, Kentucky. There was a few more in there.
Mhm.
So all of a sudden, it's like you have an opportunity as a school to get back in and say, well, we weren't recruiting you because you were committed. Whether that's true or not doesn't matter,
Right.
because you can say you're committed. We didn't want to waste your time. We didn't want to waste our time. But now that you're back on the market, we've always really liked you and we just want to be in the mix the next time around. So official visit is going to be very important.
Mhm.
Where he sets them up, how he sort of handles the next couple of months, because it's going to come at him pretty fast over the next couple of weeks. So I'm curious to
Yeah.
see where that stands and where he ends up visiting in March and maybe April.
Just one last thing: 6'2", 180, great frame. I like his potential a lot. Those guys don't come around. The way he runs, all that stuff, I think is part of this conversation. But to put that down and talk about some of the other things, of course, read more bluewhiteillustrated.com, because Fitz just said he's going to write more about that in the coming hours or day. What else is going on with recruiting that you think is important to highlight here? And of course, for people that want more, we'll have our full recruiting show on Thursday. But what's coming out this weekend do you think is important to discuss?
So I read calendars. I don't know if you've tried this or not, but next week is spring break.
Buddy,
So
I have a calendar full of things, but I have extreme ADHD. So, like, it doesn't matter. I try my best.
So what happens typically is Penn State will get a week and then have spring break and then come back on the next week, usually the 18th, and start spring practice. Well, that's not going to happen because blue white game got pushed back, or spring football weekend got pushed back, and now all of a sudden you've got another week in there. So no visitors this week, no visitors next week, and then you sort of get into the swing of things with maybe a couple of guys that are lingering around spring break. You always get those guys that come in and visit Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame. Like those are the four the spring break trips that guys come up from the South and check it out. So maybe the third week of March, and then the real visits will start at the end of March. So suffice to say that you're wasting a bit of time, but you're using the time that you have. Like it's not useful to host somebody on spring break, and a lot of those coaches are out of here anyway. Yeah, it's not going to happen much until that last weekend that last week of March. Ryan Snyder's been all over it, just sort of confirming guys left and right here. But it's going to take some patience to get there.
All right. And, I think James Franklin has talked about it before. Even if like it's a dead period or you're on vacation, if a player calls or a player wants to visit, you're not going to say no, most likely, because you want to make sure you make a good impression. That's got to be exhausting. Anything else here? I didn't want to put words in your mouth on the rundown. What else did you want to talk about here, if anything else? And we can get to that.
You got Beckham Kritza here on the rundown. Wrote about him yesterday. I think it's a very interesting situation, Penn State's quarterback room, because it is so distinct in terms of tiers, because you've got Drew as the starter. You've got the two guys battling for the backup spot, Ethan Grunkmeyer and Jackson Smolik. Smolik was the workout guy of the day. I think that you've got a gap there, and then you've got Beckham Kritza, who's going to be, as we expected, a long-term project. He came onto campus. He's south of 200 pounds, and if you see him, he's close to 6'6". I mean, he is a stork in every sense of the word. Like, he is a long and lean guy who's going to need to get stronger, but he's thrown the ball pretty well since he's gotten here. But again, this is going to be one that is a 3-year project, I think. Is the patience there to stick around? His high school transfer situation kind of sticks in the back of your mind, and I think that that's a very interesting way to follow it. But I've written a couple of these early enrollee profiles so far, and the profile is a tough word because I try to work actual intel into them, and it's just it's an interesting balance, because you look at some of the guys that came in January, and some of them have an opportunity to make some ripples in the spring. Kritza probably not one of them, but Andrew Olish, Matthew Otten, wrote about Darius Dixon a week or two ago. So you've got an opportunity for those guys to come in and maybe do something. I'm very curious to see, and I don't know if it'll matter or not, but a bunch of those guys came in for not bowl practice, but college football playoff practice. That's an incredible step to make. Because you come in, not so much the physical aspect of it, not so much the speed of the game or anything like that, but just to get into practice. Like
Yeah.
when you go from high school football to college football, the practice schedule, the regimen that you go through, not just the 2 hours that you're at practice, but the hour before in the training room and all the stuff that you do afterwards, and then you actually film practice and watch practice, like all that stuff it is a head rush, man. Like there's a lot being thrown at you very, very quickly. Now, did they get the full experience? Probably not, because Penn State was worried about playing SMU, well, I guess not SMU, but Boise and Notre Dame. But you get an idea of what the structure is. And I think that that's going to help those guys when they get there. We've seen, you remember Nate Bruce a couple of years ago. He got into practice in the spring. I think he lasted 2 practices, and that was it. Like a lot of that stuff is tough that wave just kind of crashes on you right away. And how you respond kind of dictates how the rest of your spring might go. So I'm very curious to see how these guys that arrived early, that got into the mix, that got their physicals done, that did all the physical stuff as high schoolers with college football players. I'm curious to see how that's going to pay off, and I think it can. I don't know that it will, but I think it can.
The part that I think is super interesting is these are also guys who were here, as you mentioned, like in late December. We're not talking about after the winter break or anything like that. They were here during that playoff run, and just those number of days in the weight room is just like, now we're talking about almost a full year that they're at 8-9 months that they're in the Penn State football program to actually physically develop in that first year. And I think that's incredibly valuable. Let's get to more here on the show, but of course, subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Please like the video. Always appreciate you doing those things.